So, thank you again to Norbert and Wolfgang for that very interesting project going on in the Eastern Partnership countries, so that's to the east of Europe. We heard earlier about what the Commission was doing in Ukraine. It is a priority to help all these countries reduce their emissions and also to improve the qualities of life. So you heard there, it was about saving money, it was about reducing emissions and also about improving the quality of life for daily citizens. And now we're going back to Africa, and we're going to pick up many of the themes that we've covered in some of the earlier sessions, but this time we are looking at specific project activities. We are going to be looking at an initiative which is looking at improving access to sustainable energy for small farmers in Africa. We had a link earlier on where someone was talking where in the first panel, we had the director of IRENA talking about the importance of solar-powered irrigation. I think we're going to hear more about that now. Again, the issue of public-private partnerships, but also some other interesting and innovative ideas on financing and giving people access to technology. So it's going to be a really interesting project with some real-world examples, and I am looking forward to hearing more about it.
Great. Good. Well, welcome everyone to our session. It's a match, linking water, energy and food with the private and finance sectors. It's jointly organized by the Water and Energy for Food Initiative and Energypedia. My name is Lucy Plöschke. I'm your moderator. I'm also the hub manager for the Water and Energy for Food program in East Africa. Yes. We have an interesting 45 minutes ahead of us with some opening remarks by Director Carla MONTESI. She's responsible for the Green Deal and Digital Agenda at the European Commission's Directorate-General for International Partnerships. We will hear from Mr. Sebastian LESCH, the Head of Division for Sustainable Agricultural Supply Chains, International Agriculture Policy, Agriculture and Innovation at the Federal Ministry for Economic Development and Cooperation. And then we will deep dive what the private sector and the finance sector are doing to support smallholder farmers in East Africa. And for this, we welcome Denis, the CEO of SokoFresh, a cold storage service provider in Kenya, and Boniface Mutusi, the Chief Credit and Risk Officer at Judy Kilimo, a leading microfinance institution. So I'd like to say a warm welcome to all the speakers. And just before we start, a little bit of housekeeping. You should be seeing a QR code at the bottom or the side of your page. And you need to scan this in order to participate in the polls and Q&A session. So I'd like you to do this now, and then you should be able to access and write questions and comments in the chat, which we hope to answer throughout the session. The session will be recorded, so you can have access to it later on. All right, maybe just before we start with the speakers, we would like to try the poll, and you should see the first question coming up now, asking how important is the partnership between private and public sector within the water and energy for food nexus? And I'd like you to choose an answer. You have a multiple choice, and go ahead and vote, and we will come back to the results after the opening remarks. So we will now begin by the opening remarks by Director Carla MONTESI. She's in charge of policy areas such as climate change, environment, sustainable energy, agri-food systems, transport, technology, and digitalization. So she's extremely well placed to tell us more about the development challenges within the water and energy for food nexus. So Director MONTESI, you have the floor.
Thank you, Lucy, and good afternoon to you all, and really welcome to the last session of the first day of our European Development Days. So you are courageous, you are keeping until the end. Now, the subject that we are discussing in this lab, it's really a crucial one, and why? We know that population is growing, and the food demand is increasing, as well as the demand on energy and on water. At the same time, we know that climate change brings further pressure on ecosystem, including in agriculture. And the resources needed for life and for agriculture are in danger, both in quality and in quantitative terms. We can see, and we will see during the discussion, that there are many linkages between water, energy, and the food. And it's becoming more and more evident that what we need a concerted policy, a coordinated action that address all these three elements together. And this is the reason why, for us, it's very important to speak about the nexus, and the nexus about three domains. And we have a lot to do in this domain. Now, allow me to say that the best example of having created nexus around this domain is clear the Green Deal. As you know, the Green Deal is our European growth agenda. It's our roadmap to achieve climate neutrality by 2015, to achieve also our action to avoid environment degradation. It's a roadmap that is composed by many different strategies that are tackling all together all the key domains that we are discussing here. That will be the energy, the water, the food system, as we know very well in our strategy Farm to Fork. Now, what we want to achieve with all this strategy, of course, is this green transition. We want to achieve this not just in Europe, but also with our partner countries. And this, I will say, be honest, this will require joint effort, and we require an integrated approach. This will be clearly the key objective that we want to achieve. Now, looking into the different work that is necessary, working into this green transition, allow me to just underline 2 points. One is, it's clear that we need to foster, to boost innovation. There are many solutions, but new ways to increase efficiency in water, energy, and the food system are necessary. We are working a lot, we are supporting all the research in this key domain, and allow me to mention the DESIR initiative that is our big program in the domain of the research in the agriculture, because we really believe that to transform the agricultural linking and creating this nexus require much more research in this domain, and the research not just Europe, but also with our partner countries. The second element that I would like to mention, and I'm very happy that the private sector is joining this session, it's clear to encourage capital mobilization in this sector. We know that the private sector can really contribute a lot in developing, in identifying good solutions in these areas. We have a lot of work that we would like to encourage, and allow me to say that with our new financial instrument, Global Europe, we will be mobilized many innovative financial instruments as a blended finance, as a guarantee facility that will be there to support also the action of the private sector, also in this difficult domain that could be energy, water, and agriculture. Of course, what really we want to achieve is action that are an integrated action between three sectors that are a capital in order to achieve the green transition. Now, last word is how we want to work in all this domain. Allow me to mention the Team Europe approach. It will be very, very important for us to mobilize all together our partner, but also the European institution, but also our member states, and also all the development institutions to work together to identify the best and the more impactful action in our partners, with our partners in all this domain. Now, the initiative that you will talk during the afternoon, it's the Water Energy for Food initiative. It's clearly a Team Europe initiative because we are there all together, European institution plus Germany, Sweden, Netherlands, join forces working together in these new challenges that is looking to the nexus in this domain. And I'm very, very happy to be able to listen our private sector initiative working in this domain, because it's on the basis of this experience that we can build better action for our future. So I wish you fruitful discussion, and over to you, Lucy.
Many thanks, and that was an easy transition now, because one of the key members of Team Europe is here with us, Mr. Sebastian LESCH. He is the head of division at the Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development in Germany, and he's a keen supporter of innovative approaches in the agriculture sector. So, Mr. LESCH, you have the word.
Yes, I am. Thank you very much, Lucy, and thank you, Carla, for introducing this very important session, and also for hosting this event as the European Commission. The European Development Days have been a trademark for many years. Much appreciated. It's great to be here with you today and spread awareness for the linkage of water, energy, food, and private finance sectors on an international level. And this indeed, Carla, you have mentioned it, is a Team Europe effort. If we're looking at the background, as you've done, the European Green Deal has been tremendously successful in pushing things forward on a political level. As you know, on the German side, this links in perfectly with our special initiative, One World, No Hunger, that we started in 2014, looking at and focusing on SDG 2, ending world hunger, which is the biggest of all goals. Studies have shown that Africa can feed itself by sustainably producing more and better, that is, more nutritious food using innovations. Now, the keywords here being sustainably and innovation, the two of them being sort of an inseparable pair. We need to fulfill both of these promises. That's quite important as a framing for the political debate that we are having. We have a number of instruments in terms of innovation. As Lucy has mentioned, we are great promoters of innovation, among them the Green Innovation Centers and others. But today, this is about water and energy for food that I want to highlight. This is a joint initiative bringing together the European Commission, Germany, the Netherlands, Sweden, as well as the US. We have nearly 54 million euros in development partner donor money invested, but our aim is to leverage more than 62 million euros in private sector investment through our hubs facilitation over the next 5 years. And the regional innovation hubs that are implemented partly by GIZ, partly by USAID, they provide the link between innovators, small and medium enterprises, smallholder farmers, and facilitate knowledge and capacity development through trainings for end users. What's our aim as Water and Energy for Food? We aim to produce more and better nutritious food with less resources. We aim to increase income and employment for women and men, both in rural and urban areas. We aim to promote climate and environmental resilience and biodiversity. And of course, we aim to scale innovative, sustainable solutions in the water and energy for food nexus. Specifically, what we're looking at in terms of innovations is strengthening local agri-food systems through private sector-driven innovation and real business support for local innovators. So this is really thought from the private sector side. In agriculture, that includes smallholders, but also food industry, food retailers, food agro-processing, service providers. This is the biggest private sector in the world, and we need to bring that power to the table. There is a strong need for leapfrogging solutions and innovations in Africa for local SMEs, but also through local SMEs in and around the food system. And we want to democratize the access to technological solutions and to finance for the end user, for smallholder farmers. So solutions in access to finance could be a breakthrough in rural development, because if you look at where we're starting from, you see that, for example, in the MENA region, only 5% of all smallholder farmers have access to finance, to bank loans. Only 10% of women smallholder farmers in developing countries overall have access to finance. While on the other hand, they are producing 80% of the overall food. So it's obvious that there is a huge potential and a huge need for change as well. Now, the climate change debates and climate change action are gaining momentum, are gaining traction. And so more and more climate-focused approaches are needed in the future. I'm very confident that the strategies that we promote will be even more and more important over time and will become more and more relevant. I think with water and energy for food, we are really at the core of that conversation in Europe, but also in the US. I wish you a very fruitful lab debate today. I think there are very interesting inputs by our two main speakers from Kenya. So I wish you a very fruitful and good debate. Thank you.
Thank you as well. And you can feel the energy and the political will behind these big strategies, both the World Without Hunger and the Green Deal. Now, let's have a look at the poll results just to see if it's working. We have asked the audience how important the partnership between the private and public sector is within the water and energy for food nexus. And I'm wondering if we can get the results. We said very important, important, not so important, and everyone agrees it is important. Excellent. Well, maybe we'll turn our focus to the private sector then. Denis KAREMA is the CEO of SokoFresh. It's a Kenyan company that is providing cold storage on a pay-as-you-store model. Now, Denis, can you tell us a little bit more about your company and what you're doing with smallholders?
Thank you so much. So we are really at the heart of democratizing access to climate-smart innovations for smallholder farmers. And how we do this is by setting up cold storage hubs within the rural communities where most of the agricultural production is happening and where there's the biggest cases of post-harvest loss. And so by providing access to cold storage and market linkage, we are able to give the farmers the power to be able to, one, come together, aggregate sufficient volumes of produce and have a better bargaining power when it comes to interactions with the market.
Great. Excellent. All right. We seem to have lost the connection with Denis. All right, then maybe we can show his slides now. Good. Denis, can you pick it up from here?
Yes, I hope everyone can hear me clearly.
We can.
Yes. So at SokoFresh, we are really bringing cold storage benefits to smallholder farmers, enabling them to aggregate their produce in a more standardized way, increasing the shelf life of that produce. And really, this is at the heart of reducing post-harvest losses that are currently at between 30 to 40%. We are really driven to bring climate-smart innovations close to these rural communities where production is happening, because we believe that because 80% of production is happening there, that's also where these technologies can have the highest impact. Thank you. And if we can go next. So the issue that we are addressing is really a cold storage deficit issue. So we find that in the urban areas, there is availability of cold storage, but at the first mile level, cold storage is not present currently. This leads to high losses in terms of fruits and vegetables that are lost due to poor aggregation and lack of cold storage. When we look into the issue further, we see that really the technologies exist. It's just that we lack business models and financing models that can catalyze the adoption. And so at SokoFresh, we are really circumventing these challenges that smallholder farmers face challenges in accessing these assets by making the assets available without them investing in the capex, and also by making cold storage available for a season. And so we are able to move the cold storage facilities from one region to the other where need is. And that way we are able to maximize on the utilization. We can go next. Yes, and our business model is twofold. So on one side, we work with aggregators, cooperatives, and exporters. These are people who have a network of smallholder farmers that exist in a certain region, and you are able to provide the cold storage facilities within those regions, and the network of smallholder farmers are able to use them. And then our other model is where we look at where is the highest production of a certain crop. For example, it could be mangoes, it could be avocados, and we set up hubs within those communities. And there we are working directly with the smallholder farmers, providing them the opportunity to aggregate their produce in ideal conditions, and also driving demand for the produce, so that at the end of the day, we are able to see an income increase for the farmers, and really make farmers central to these transactions of their produce. We can go next. Thank you. Yeah, so, and we have quite, I would say, a straightforward model. So we work in value chains. So we are looking at how can we make value chain a bit shorter, and also how can we be able to really have the most impact. So we define the value chains. We work on recruiting farmers and farmer agents and local champions who are really the people in the community who are the first early adopters of our solution. We secure the locations where we will set up the cold storage infrastructure. Just for context, each cold storage is the size of a 20-foot container and has solar panels on the top. We set up the cold storages in those regions. We align farmers and buyer expectations. This is through our add-on market linkage service, where we communicate to the buyers what is available from the farmers, and communicate to the farmers what offers are there from the buyers. And then we kick off the operations. So we work across the season with farmers at multiple points as their produce gets ready. And we bring these farmers to a point where they're able to interact directly with the buyers. And if we can go to the next slide. The benefits of this is, one, there is an immediate income gain for the farmers because the value chain is shortened, the produce quality is maintained, and so we are able to see and realize a 20 to 30% income gain for the farmers that we are working with. We also have seen that by providing these ideal aggregation facilities, that cooperatives and farmer groups have a higher bargaining power when it comes to dealing with buyers. They are able to have buyers come and collect the produce instead of organizing for logistics to take the produce to the markets. And also there is the environmental impact. Our cold storages are fully solar powered, and so there is really quite an offset of carbon emissions from that. And the other thing is, for the buyers on the other end, there is a higher rate of acceptance of the produce because of the ideal conditions that is stored in. And we are really closing the loop. The missing link in cold chains working in our markets is really the first mile. So you have cold storage working in the markets, but not as nothing existing in the first mile infrastructure in terms of cold storage. And also by bringing farmers and the produce and the aggregation center in one location, then we are also able to provide traceability of produce. So consumers can better be able to know where the produce came from, which farmer it came from, how it was aggregated, and when it was transported.
Okay,
thank
we
you,
have one more minute. Sorry.
Yes, one more minute. Yeah, so I think the key thing here is really that also the work that we are doing requires us to really build additional partnerships. And so I'm happy to have conversations with partners who can help us really scale up as we seek to provide cold hubs in every part of the country where produce is aggregated and where there is huge losses. Thank you so much.
Excellent, thank you. And you're showing us a solution where farmers don't need the capital to buy technology or own it, but rather you offer it as a service, which makes it more accessible. Now, our next speaker is working for Judy Kilimo, a microfinance institution that provides loans and trainings directly to farmers so they can purchase assets, so there's an actual purchase, but also optimize operations. Now, Boniface Motusi, can you tell us more? And we can see the slides.
Sure. Quite a pleasure. Judy Kilimo, like you've rightfully said, is a microfinance institution in Kenya, a credit-only microfinance institution that is working with smallholder farmers to help them gain access. In the opening remarks, it was rightfully mentioned that 10%, only 10% have access to loans from the banks. So Judy Kilimo is among the players that are playing in that space, where we want to create financial inclusion for those that are excluded from the mainstream banking institutions. And also, as mentioned by the first speaker, the director, we have challenges of climate change. And what we see on the screen is a typical example of a farm in the African context. We can see we have seasonalities where the same piece of land where we see the livestock grazing is the same piece of land when there is rain and during the dry season. And during the dry season, it's literally dry, almost feeding on the soil. But then as we move on, in the next slides, we'll be able to appreciate more of how Judy Kilimo comes in. This slide talks about the context of the African farmer. We're looking at over-reliance on the rain-fed agriculture, looking at poor infrastructure, which actually affects the access to the markets, land fragmentation with the increasing population that has been rightfully mentioned. What SokoFresh is addressing is a key challenge, post-harvest methods for the farmers, and of course, flooded markets, poor farming methods, and unfavorable government policies, exploitation by middlemen, as well as the wrong attitudes by the African youth as far as agriculture is concerned. So in Africa, there is a lot of talk about agriculture being the backbone of the economy. And lately, one of the young fellas in Africa said that agriculture should actually be the heartbeat. However, this is well said, but in the middle of all these challenges. So we come in and see how we can help farmers achieve what they need to achieve in an optimal level despite these challenges. And I would be glad to explain how we go about this as Judy Kilimo in the next slides. Before we get to Judy Kilimo, we have a typical agricultural value chain. And most of the smallholder farmers are actually operating at the production level, where you can see the first two labels there. And at this level, we have a lot that is happening in the farm, but then in terms of the gains that accrue from logistical support as well as processing, then that is lost to the typical African farmer. And where we come in as financiers, where the private sector comes in, is actually to help the farmers move from the production level, gain access to logistics support, as well as processing, and then they can be able to get maximum benefits. So this is just at a glance where we have most of the farmers operating and the challenges they are facing, and how the private sector, as well as financiers, can come in to actually fill in the gap and help the farmers get to the next level. Judy Kilimo, model of operation is explained in the next slide. As you can see, like Lucy rightfully said, we are a credit-only microfinance in Kenya, and we differentiate ourselves as a microfinance institution that is not only providing the financing, but is working with the farmers to ensure that our financing goes to acquisition of asset that would be an income generation. And that has been evolving over the time since the year 2009, when Judy Kilimo began operating on its own. We've been able to move from financing farmers to acquire only a cow, to acquisition of many other assets within the agricultural space. And over the years, we've been able to succeed as an institution because of that first differentiator, where we want to support the farmer to increase their income levels through acquisition of an asset, where we get down to actually work with the farmers. They don't have to come to the urban centers to get access to the banks. We offer training alongside our financial services. And this we do as an institution internally, as well as through collaboration with our partners or other players in the agricultural space. We also looking at impact and transformation. As an institution, we are very keen on how do we transform the lives of the farmers. Yes, we are in business, we have to be sustainable, but at the end of the day, we want to see to what extent are the farmers progressing from the poverty levels, getting better, being able to put food on the table. And we also want to create market linkages for the farmers, as well as embracing technology. I can rightfully say here that Judy Kilimo has actually been in discussions with SokoFresh. And from this discussion, I'm actually getting a better understanding of what SokoFresh has been doing. And this is a discussion I would want us to take further, because it addresses one of the challenges I mentioned at the beginning, the post-harvest challenges. And then finally, for Judy Kilimo to succeed, we've actually been working with our farmers. We've grown with them step by step, and that has been one of our winning areas. It has endeared us to the farmers. It has enabled us to understand the farmers much better. And that way we are able to meet their needs in a very special way. Next slide, kindly. What I have there is a snapshot of Judy Kilimo loan products. Yes, we have the crop farming there, we have the animal farming, and this slide shows our farm equipment loans. And a good example is where we are helping the farmers to acquire water tanks. You can see that is a co-branded water tank that has been acquired through a loan from Judy Kilimo. When that happens, we know the farmer is able to store the water during the time of the rains and be able to have production throughout the year, either have water for their livestock or have water for the crops. Again, we provide the working capital loan. This is to help them acquire quality inputs, which is very critical to the quality of produce that they have at the end of the farming period. Again, like I mentioned, we are very keen on improving the quality of the farmer's life in terms of clean energy solutions. Here we are working with providers of solar solutions, which is also important for a friendly environment. We're also taking care of the farmers' day needs through our consumer loan. And then finally, we're looking at the micro housing loans, where we are working with the farmers to just be able to grow with us. Once they are done with the farming, they want to own some assets, including houses, we work with them. However, our flagship product is actually the ability to provide an asset to the farmer. Next slide. This is a typical case of one of our farmers who joined Judy Kilimo when we started our business in Kitale, that is in Western Kenya. And if you could just run through the slides, it's a quick demonstration of how we've been able to grow with the farmer. He had been experiencing losses. When he joined Judy Kilimo, he started with a water pump. He moved on to acquire a dairy cow in the second loan. Let's carry on with the journey. The third loan, he was able to acquire more farm inputs, and he was able to produce more tomato and maize. At the fourth level, he was able to acquire a grain mill. And at that point, he is even getting more value for the maize that is producing by turning it into flour. And that means that the final output or the final income is getting better. And then we are still carrying on with the farmer who is now able to acquire more assets. Let's carry on with the journey. As we look at the conclusion and the way forward, one of the expectations is that the private sector and the financiers have a role to play in the realization of the SDGs. And while that is our objective, I would really strongly encourage that the government should actually work on farmer-friendly policies. I did mention that in Africa there is a lot of talk about agriculture, but then the policies are not really very friendly to our farmers, and that's a challenge to the African governments. We need to establish value addition facilities. You see SokoFresh is coming in as one of the players in the private sector. We have many others that are coming in, but again, if we could have the governments also subsidize this, as well as the innovations in that space, we could actually get better results and more faster. There is importance to protect the markets for the local producers to avoid wastages. A country like Kenya, you will find that there is a lot of production of maize, but we will also be importing maize while we've actually not exhausted what our local farmers have produced. That does not come out very well for our farmers. We need to work on the improvement of the infrastructure. This is to ensure that our farmers are able to get quick access and easy access to the markets, and that will reduce the wastages that happen because of our inability to access the markets. And there is also need to really invest in irrigation. With the climate changes that we are experiencing, it is very important that we have to look at how do we provide sustainable solutions, especially in the water space. And when that is done, we basically are going to increase the volumes of food production and be able to achieve the sustainability. And then there is a need to also look at adoption of modern farming technologies. And this is going to position agriculture as a very attractive option. And our youngsters whose attitudes are wrong to agriculture, I'm very sure they are going to get attracted. That speaker that I made reference to actually said that she thinks agriculture should be made more sexy and more attractive for the young generation to get into it. So, Lucy, I would really want to put across those few remarks in terms of how the private sector as well as the financiers can contribute to the agricultural space and to the improvement of the small rural older farmers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Boniface, and you make it sound very easy. Can I pose a question to you? Why do you think there aren't more Judy Kilimos around the world in Kenya?
Lucy, it's common knowledge that the agricultural space is a risky space. I did start by mentioning the context, and most of the financiers are really interested in looking at the rate of return. And if there is a higher risk in the agricultural space, then we have less financiers wanting to operate in that space. But I believe with time, quite a number will still come on board. But Judy Kilimo has been able to crack it, and we encourage that many more can still join us.
All right, that is, I hope so too. It's an impressive first step also to see what you're doing. We're opening up for questions now. So if you have any comments, questions to our speakers, you can write them in the chat. And as you do that, maybe let me direct the word to Denis. What are the main challenges that you encounter in convincing smallholder farmers to use your services? Your cooling, cold storage.
Yeah, thank you, Lucy. I think the one key challenge is that farmers really want to work with people they trust. And so we have had to build a relationship with the farmers that we work with, and it takes time, because in most of these value chains, farmers have really been taken advantage of by different actors who look at just short-term gains. How can they make the most from the farmer? And so the one challenge is really the challenge of building trust. And also the other one is really that is sort of explaining to the farmer that in our model, the farmer is central, and we are looking out for their best interests, because it's not commonplace. Not everyone goes to the farmer with the best interests of the farmer at heart. But also, as Boniface has mentioned from Judy Kilimo, I think one of the things that really appeals to us with working with like-minded organizations like Judy Kilimo is really that we have an honest approach where we are putting the farmer in the middle, and it takes farmers a while to see this in practice. But once we have worked with them for one season, then it makes it very easy to scale the solution across the region, where because farmers also share by word of mouth the good things that are happening in their communities.
Good. And do you think there is any specific value chain that makes it easier to work in? You mentioned your value chain approach.
Yes, so value chains where that are export oriented tend to be easier, because one, there is a very huge benefit if more produce gets to the market. There is a financial incentive for the farmer, and also there are very strict standards that the export market requires in terms of produce handling. So when you look at key horticultural exports from Kenya, the French beans, sugar snap, mangoes, avocado, so those value chains are really some of the, I would say, early adopters of the solutions that we are providing, because the market also dictates that these standards be applied.
Good. Mr. LESCH, we've heard about the One World No Hunger initiative, and we also heard that there's a need for policy change to support smallholder farmers more. What is BMZ doing in regard to policy and innovation policy?
Well, thank you, Lucy. I mean, policy change means policy on all levels. Policy change means changing policies in partner countries. That's something you do in dialogue with the governments, by advising them as they require, by dialogue with societies in those partner countries. Policy change means actual innovation on the ground. That's what you do through projects. And I've mentioned the Green Innovation Centers. We're talking today about water energy for food. We have a number of other projects who are incubating and then scaling up innovations in different areas. Let me mention digitalization. That is something, especially when we're looking at the leapfrogging that I mentioned in the beginning. But then, of course, policy change also means us. It means policy change in Germany, in Europe, in terms of us being consumers of agricultural products. We have the European Green Deal and we have the Farm to Fork strategy. Carla mentioned that in the beginning. And the Farm to Fork strategy is something that looks mainly on the European market. Let me mention, for example, food loss. Let me mention deforestation as something that we need to be looking up. The European Union is one of the biggest importers of deforestation. So policy really means policy with all stakeholders and all levels. That's what makes this field so complex, but that's, of course, what makes it exciting to cooperate in a Team Europe approach.
Good, good. I have a question for Boniface here. You referred to climate change, but how is that affecting your risk assessment as a credit and loan officer in Judy Kilimo? What changes have you seen in the past years, and how is that affecting risk?
Well, thank you, Lucy. You've actually spoken to something that is very alive in my mind. I spent last week in the North Rift region of the country, and I can say we are actually staring at crop failure because of insufficient rains. So this is right at the heart of what we are doing. In terms of how we're looking at that from a risk perspective, one of the things we actually encourage in our farmers is to look at mixed farming. We also are advising them to work with the agricultural experts and see whether they could have more drought-resistant crops, especially those that are grown in the lower parts of the country, where it's a bit semi-arid. Because what happens in the North Rift is that they have a variety of maize that takes about 6 to 7 months to mature, while we have varieties in other parts of the country that go for 3 months. Thank you, Lucy.
Yeah, we hear the gong, and that means it's been an absolute pleasure discussing and learning from you. I have 3 more minutes. Pardon. Okay, then even better. Then there's another question for Denis. Denis, in terms of the partners that you work with, what is your experience with cooperatives?
Yes, so the partners that we currently work with are running outgrower schemes. And so they have farmers who are already contracted. And for those, it's been quite a pleasant experience, particularly because they see the need that we have. And so we also see a longer term partnership with them. For farmer-run cooperatives, now we are actually engaging in, for example, the avocado value chain, where farmers are still not as organized in groups, and really sort of helping them to build this sort of cooperative movement within them. And so there we are playing a much bigger role than just being a cold storage and market linkage provider, but also really trying to group farmers and help them sort of work in a more cohesive unit. And so I await to see. I'm quite curious to see how that experience turns out for us. But ideally, for the outgrower farmers that are already under one aggregator, it's quite a straightforward approach.
All right. Then we take one final question for Mr. LESCH. Donor institutions do not really understand the importance of irrigation technology. It's been considered bad for water resources management for a long time. What is the attitude now?
What is that is a generalization, obviously. I mean, we've had a recent study done on behalf of the German government that has shown that small-scale irrigation is indeed a game changer in many respects, and is one of the low-hanging fruits where relatively little investment can lead to a lot of change. So I would not say that we don't have this on the agenda. There are risks associated with irrigation, but those risks need to be dealt with in a context-specific matter. So I think you have to look at the individual situation, and then you have to make a choice. You have to bring the dimensions of sustainability that there are. That is ecological sustainability, but that's also social sustainability and economical sustainability. You need to bring these in check and find a balance between the three in this individual case. Thank you.
All right, good. Then thank you for all the speakers. We've learned a lot about different business and finance models to reach smallholder farmers. SokoFresh shows us we don't have to own it to access it. And Judy Kilimo shows us that finance is not everything, but you also need to work with the farmers to their conditions and abilities. I would like to thank all the organizers, especially Ranisha from Energypedia, who has been behind all the logistics, and of course all the speakers, Director MONTESI, Director LESCH, Denis KAREMA, and Boniface Mutusi. So thank you all for joining us here, and have a good evening, and goodbye.
Thank you, Lucy, for a really interesting session there, which was taking some of the themes that we heard on a rather high level earlier today and giving some illustrations of projects, specific projects that are happening on the ground. Some really interesting ideas there on microfinancing, not just for assets, but also capacity building, which is one of the themes we've heard throughout today, about the need to transfer knowledge to local actors so that they can continue to work even after the project has moved on. And another really interesting idea there about the sharing of the cool stores, sort of a similar idea of the sharing economy that, you know, here in Brussels we use for cars and bikes, like taking that model and using it in ways that really help African farmers improve their daily lives and their incomes whilst using sustainable energy. So a really, really interesting project there. Thank you very much to all the speakers and to Lucy for that. And what was also particularly nice for that session was that we were hearing from some African entrepreneurs and what they're doing. And that's where we're going for our next and final session as well. We're going to welcome back one of our young entrepreneurs that we heard from at the beginning of the session. That is Chibun Obuna, who is speaking in the first session as one of the European Development Day's young leaders. He has been working on a project called Lighting Up Nigeria, the Lighting Up Nigeria initiative, and it's with great pleasure that we're going to invite him back and ask him to tell us a little bit more about it. So we're going to hear from him very soon, or we are going straight to him, perhaps. So I can see him on the screen. Okay, so I see him on the screen. So he's here already. Hello, Chibun. Thank you. Welcome back. So just in case people weren't here for the session earlier this morning, can you just introduce yourself again and tell us what your role is in this project?
Okay, thank you very much for this opportunity. My name is Chibun Obuna. I'm the head young leader from Nigeria. I'm also the co-founder of Kiri Energy Limited. And I currently lead the research for the Global Youth Energy Outlook in Sub-Saharan Africa as the regional coordinator. That's just a few of the things I do. I'm also the project lead for the Lighting Up Nigeria initiative, a social impact project of our company that seeks to power 10,000 local healthcare clinics using solar energy by 2030 in Nigeria. Thank you very much.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Chibun. So let's get started. What made you come up with this idea for the Lighting Up Nigeria initiative?
Okay, well, when I came back from the International Renewable Energy Agency Youth Forum in Abu Dhabi earlier in January 2020, we never knew that we were going to experience COVID-19, but it just happened that when COVID-19 struck the world, everybody was on lockdown, and school stopped, businesses almost collapsed, and also healthcare facilities across Nigeria and across all other parts of Africa were in, the kind of a crisis and emergency. And many of these healthcare facilities did not have the requisite facilities or the equipment to cater for those who had COVID-19 or those who had other health implications. So while we were brainstorming on how we could be part of the solution, we came up with the idea to power local healthcare clinics in our communities here in Nigeria using solar energy. So that is how we came up with the Lighting Up Nigeria initiative as a way to respond to COVID-19 and also to help build more resilient healthcare facilities across Nigeria.
Okay, and you mentioned earlier in your introduction there that your goal is to bring solar power to 10,000 clinics in Nigeria. I mean, that seems like a hugely ambitious goal. How's it going?
Ambitious. Yes, it's going very well. We have started off with the first pilot project in Umuahia, Nigeria. We started since October, as I told you earlier. So what we discovered was, apart from installing solar power, some of the healthcare facilities need renovation. So many parts of the healthcare facility was dilapidating. Some of them are underfunded. So we have to, come in to renovate parts of the healthcare facility and also then to install the solar power next. So that is where we are now. We are completing the renovations for the pilot project, and soon we will now install the solar power there. So the 10,000 goal is very, very ambitious because we feel that giving ourselves a challenging goal will help us to, dream bigger and also make more impact, in terms of sustainable energy for healthcare. And looking at Nigeria's population, over 200 million people, so 10,000 healthcare clinics is really a small goal, And I believe that by 2030, through international cooperation, partnerships, we'll be able to achieve this goal. Thank you.
Okay, so I mean, you said there. I mean, obviously, it's a challenging goal. I mean, what kind of challenges? What kind of specific challenges are you facing, and how are you able to overcome those challenges?
Okay, the first challenge is being able to understand the right models that will suit each community, because every community is special in their own way. So we have to develop new models or new business models or new strategies on how to implement this project for each community. Some communities want to participate by contributing a percentage of the money. Some communities don't want to participate at all. They just want the organization or the company to just bring this solution to them without their participation. So different communities with different preferences. So that is just one challenge. Another challenge is the fact that we have very low investment prioritized for local healthcare facilities. And you know that for primary healthcare, it's very essential to achieving universal health care. So if we are not able to have investments that flow to primary healthcare, then it will be difficult to achieve universal healthcare. Another challenge on ground is the fact that most of the healthcare workers who help with the solutions, who help to bring these solutions to the community members, most of them are not catered for. Most of them, live in very poor conditions, and despite the fact that they work all through the day to ensure that people receive basic medical health care services, there is no welfare, for them. So there needs to be a welfare system for healthcare workers, in incentives, in salaries, and in terms of in general welfare. There needs to be an improved welfare for these people. So apart from these challenges I've mentioned, I will also say the final one will be funding, because most of these projects, as we started them, we had to start with our own funding. Myself and my partners, we contributed money from our own personal funding in order to finance this project. So I would say financing for sustainable energy projects for healthcare is very, very important. And this is one challenge that needs to be overcome as well.
Okay, and that's an interesting point, because financing has been one of the topics that's come up again and again during today's discussions. But also I was quite interested there in what you were saying about it's not enough just to bring electricity and sustainable energy to the actual physical hospital buildings and clinics. You've also got to help the people who work there to have better lives and better living conditions, so that you can improve the healthcare directly that way as well. So that might be something that's less obvious to when you go and explain your project. It's less obvious. It's a nice thing that you've considered that as well. So, I mean, you're saying, it's a drop in the ocean for Nigeria, but you're clearly a man with big plans. Is the model something that you think is scalable? Could it work in other places? Could it be scaled up to be something bigger?
Absolutely. I believe that if we are able to implement this project and the impact is seen in the next few years, let's say by 2023, we're able to reach more than 500 local healthcare clinics with our sustainable energy solutions. And then the impact is felt, the number of people impacted will be increased. There will be more access to jobs. Sustainable energy for healthcare will create jobs, will also improve the general well-being of each community, and also make communities to not be weaklings, in achieving global healthcare. So I believe that this is something that can be scaled as long as we prioritize investments. As long as our leaders, our policymakers, draft the budgets and then direct them to sustainable energy for healthcare, especially in order to improve the primary healthcare in local communities and also vulnerable communities. So I believe that this model is something that will be scaled just with time.
Okay, and then just one final question, because you mentioned policymakers there. I mean, if you could ask for anything you wanted, and not just money, because we already know that financing is a problem, but what is it that policymakers can do that doesn't necessarily involve money? How can policymakers make this kind of project fly?
Okay, one thing. Okay, thank you for that question. One thing policymakers can do to make this project fly is to ensure that the laws and the policies that are being made, are directed towards the improvement of healthcare generally, and not just about the funding, but improvement of general healthcare in local communities. So, meaning that when we are making our laws, when policymakers are considering the laws and other policies, they should inculcate healthcare and sustainable energy as a priority. Yeah, so that is what I have to say.
Okay, and that comes back to the theme of the first session you were involved in this afternoon about energy and healthcare being a nexus, a very important linkages between them, and that you can't have good healthcare without having good access to sustainable energy. So that's a really important point there, and a really good point to end our day on. So thank you so much, Chibun, for joining us again. I wish you all the best with your project, and I hope to see you again at other European Development Days. Thank you very much, and goodbye.